At the end of the last video, we looked at the console log that had been returned from our query, and I had said that it looked like we were working with some JSON data here. However, I want to investigate what value actually got console logged here when we made the query using exec. So just as a reminder, this console log right here is the result of this console log. It's what we get back from running the query itself. Okay, so one thing I want to remind you, and this is why we care about what that return value is at all, is the expected return values that usually come from the exec function. Anytime that we try to monkey patch or overwrite an existing function inside of a library, we have to be very cognizant of what values we are returning, because we never know how that library is attempting to use that function itself. So whenever we call the exec function, the Mongoose library expects that we're going to return a promise that eventually resolves with some Mongoose documents. So even though our console log right here looks like we're working with a plain JavaScript object or just some regular JSON data, this is not actually a plain JavaScript object. In fact, this is a Mongoose document, or what we refer to as a model instance. I can prove that to you as a matter of fact. If we go back to our console log and update it to say result.validate, like so, and then refresh our application one more time, and then check the terminal, you'll notice that the console log is now a function. And obviously that object before did not have a validate function. Only Mongoose documents do. Now the reason that this is a problem at all is that when we start thinking about caching values here, we've got one function that returns a bunch of Mongoose documents, or in this case just one Mongoose document. But when we try to start storing this data inside of Redis, we're not going to be working with smart objects or objects with prototypes or functions or anything like that tied to them. Remember, Redis only stores essentially strings and numbers, essentially for us, JSON data. So we need to be very cognizant of the fact that sometimes this data that we're going to be working with is going to be model instances or documents. And then in some other cases, like when we want to interact with Redis, it needs to be in a JSON format. So let's keep that in mind as we start writing some more code back inside this file right here. So we can return result right here. We can return that right away and everything will work inside of our application as we expect, because result right here is the actual document instance, and that is what is expected to be returned from the exec function. Let's try that right now. I'm going to return result like so. I'm going to save the file, and then if I go refresh the application, you'll notice that everything works the way I expect. So I'm logged in and my blog posts appear on the screen. So we need to make sure that before we try to take this result right here and store it inside of Redis, we need to first turn it into JSON. So let's do that right now. We're going to take result, we're going to turn it into JSON, and then we'll store it inside of Redis. So I'll say client.set. I'm going to set that key that we had produced way up here at the top of the file, so key right here. And inside there, I'm going to set json.stringify result, like so. Okay, so this is definitely now going to take the result that we got back, turn it into JSON data, and then set it inside of Redis at that particular key. So now, if we run our application or we refresh our page again twice inside the browser, we should see one time where we attempt to set this data inside of Redis, and the next time we refresh, we should then see our console log appear, where we are pulling this data back out of Redis. So let's try that right now. So I'm going to go back over, I'm going to refresh one time, so this is going to put our data into Redis, and I'm going to try it one more time, and now we should be attempting to pull it out of Redis. Cool, so looks like that worked out to some degree. Now let's check our terminal down here and just make sure that this console log appeared. Cool, so I see my console log, so this is the data that we just fetched out of Redis. Now you'll notice that our application or everything still worked the way we expected. That's because inside the if statement right here, we're not attempting to return early. So right now we're still letting the query run on over to the actual MongoDB instance. And when that happens, we're trying to actually return that result rather than returning the cache value early up here. So let's change that right now. Let's return the cached value and not attempt to actually run the code that goes over to MongoDB. So I'm going to say return cache value, like so. And then remember, anything that comes out of Redis is going to be in JSON form. So we need to parse it before we return it from this caching function. So I'm going to say json.parse with cache value like so. Okay, let's give this a shot. I'm going to save the file, and I'll go refresh the page. And, well, it looks like something loaded up here, but I didn't actually get any content appear on the screen. So clearly, something is still not quite working the way we expect. Let's take a pause right here. We're going to think if we can't figure out exactly what's happening that's preventing us from actually seeing any content appear. So I'll see you in just a minute.